Hi, everyone, it's Dr. Miller, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about satire. And as a way to kind of introduce us to this concept, I want to share with you some political cartoons that might help us think about satire in a different way or in a new way. But if we take a look at the images in front of us, we can see how absolutely absurd this image is, which makes it a little bit interesting. We've got this man who is glued to his computer, and his computer signifies or it represents the social media. And of course, according to this strong arm here, it's all disinformation, and it just mixes everything up in our brain. So obviously, when looking at this political cartoon, there's a huge conversation to be had about what's going on, what's the issue, what doesn't belong there, what is exaggerated, what is the message here. There's so many different things that you have to look at or take apart in order to deconstruct a political cartoon and identify some of the satirical characteristics in it. Let's take a look at this next image where this mom is trying to assert her power by saying, hey, you can't use your phone unless you improve your grades. And we've got this phone that now usurps any power that mom has because the little teenager is saying to herself, well, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm just going to text my lawyer. So obviously, the child probably doesn't have an attorney, but the message here is pretty clear about the power these devices have. And again, there's a whole conversation that you could have about what's happening in this image as well. This perhaps is my favorite, this critique of the school lunches. And it's just hilarious in so many different ways, and it's poking fun at it. There's so many things happening in this image. But again, the first thing to look at is what doesn't belong. There's a lot of things that don't belong. My favorite part of this image is the salt, the pile of salt, right? The sodium that's going to be in all of the food, the starch, the pizza, the tomato paste, all of it's funny. And where do we see? We see the nutritional guidelines in the trash. And who has taken over the school lunches? According to this image, it's Congress, the food industry lobby, right? And of course, this kid is like, this is way better. So there's so many things to talk about in this image or political cartoon that helps us kind of shed light on what is satire. So it's mocking the weakness of others. That's what satire is. And if we look at this image, we can see a baby in the center of a table, and people are eating it, and they're decorating the baby, and they're, putting condiments on there so they can get ready to devour this child, right? And that's the whole thing with Mater's proposal. And this is really a literary art of reducing a topic so that it is absolutely ridiculous. In satire, laughter is used as a weapon, right? So yeah, it's funny, but it's meant to destroy. And so it's funny. There's contempt, a bit of scorn, right? You think there's a sense of like worthlessness, indignation, or there's some issue or subject that is not being addressed fairly, and so satire looks to remedy that. What's the target of satire? In a work, you could look at, it could be making fun of the individual. It could be, the work could be whether it's a political cartoon or an essay or a prose or a cartoon show or a movie that has satire in there. It could be that the target is a class of people, an institution. It could be a nation or the entire human race. So when you're looking at a piece of work and it's clear that it's ridiculous, things are out of place, there's a bit of humor, you're dealing with satire. And so you have to ask yourself, well, who's the butt of the joke here? Who is getting all of the flack in this case? And if it's the individual, who is it? If it's a type of person, what is it? If it's a class of people, what class are they? So satirical writers justify this literary art as a tactic to correct the wrongs of human flaws and stupidity. stupidity. Sometimes it's incidental and sometimes it's deliberate. So if in a work it's incidental, it's not necessarily considered, it might be satirical, but the entire piece, for it to be a satirical work, it has to be deliberate. So sometimes authors have a little bit of satire in there, but the whole thing is not necessarily satirical. And you know when it's deliberate when the entire work from beginning to end is riddled with satire. So there's two different types of satire. There's the formal satire versus indirect satire. So direct versus indirect. So informal or formal. A formal satire uses first person. It's directed at the reader. And then there's the character in the work known as the adversarius. The purpose of the adversarius is to add credibility. That's the key word to the satirical speaker's comments, right? So you've got this adversary who is who they're projecting everything on, and so they're adding credibility to the speaker's comments. The treatment of the subject possesses the same attitude directed at the reader. This is Horatian satire versus Juvenalian satire. And really, these are two Roman satirists. And the Horatian satire is formal. The speaker presents the character as refined, sophisticated, witty, tolerant individual. This one is, I think the key here is the audience laughs at themselves as well. So it's funny, but we're supposed to enjoy this and it's entertaining. The goal is for individuals to cure their ailments through laughter. And it's a little bit more relaxed and informal. Now, do you need to know these terms? And when you're writing about satire, say, oh, this is Horatian satire? Not necessarily, but certainly helps you to see if there's some qualities that distinguish one from the other. Then we have the Juvenalian satire, another Roman satirist, a serious moral character. And so if you look at maybe Family Guy, you might see some cartoons where they exhibit some Juvenalian satire, a refined approach, and it definitely seeks contempt. Whereas if you go back to the Horatian satire, it's more of we're all laughing and we just want to laugh and make it funny and we want to make things better. But in Juvenalian satire, there's a desire to there's a lot of contempt. It's perhaps even anger exhibited throughout the work. There's the indirect satire, and that's through Gulliver's Travel. That's a prose text. Menippean or Varronian satire. It's a prose, it's a fictional narrative. The character makes themselves ridiculous. It's written in prose. There's extended dialogues and debates. Typically, it's held at a banquet or a party. And it's just really an attack on the mental attitude as opposed to like the individual or a nation. It's about the attitude of people. That's it. Hope that was helpful. And we'll get to practice some opportunities in class.